It all happened in a single life-altering moment. She had discovered the hidden truth, an affair her partner had been hiding for months. The words came like a slap, cold and hard. His voice trembled as he tried to explain, but nothing could erase the betrayal that was now etched in her mind. She stood frozen, as if her body couldn't comprehend the reality unfolding. All the shared memories, the whispered promises, everything felt like a lie. As his hands reached for her, desperation in his eyes, she recoiled. The world she had built around their relationship was suddenly shattered, and in its place was a cold, suffocating emptiness. How could this happen? How could he betray her so completely? She was no longer just hurt. She was broken. The trust, once so carefully nurtured, was gone. And now, she was left with a question that would haunt her forever. What was left to save? She left, unable to breathe in the suffocating tension any longer. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed space, time to gather herself. Her mind raced, her heart shattered with every step. The world felt like it was closing in on her, the questions swirling relentlessly in her head. How could he betray her like this? She had trusted him, loved him, and this was how it ended. As she walked aimlessly, her surroundings blurred, everything seemed out of focus, just like her thoughts. She felt disconnected from herself, unsure of who she was without him. She couldn't even bring herself to go back to their shared apartment, to face the reality of the home they had built together. Was it all a lie? Was it just a facade? The anger started to build within her, but it was followed quickly by overwhelming sadness. All the plans they had made together seemed pointless now. She felt completely alone, with no one to lean on. This wasn't how her life was supposed to be. She found herself sitting at a cafe, the mug of coffee in front of her untouched. The sounds of the bustling city were muffled, as if she were submerged underwater. Her thoughts swirled, mixing anger with heartbreak. She kept replaying his words, his excuses, his apologies. Nothing made sense anymore. She had always believed in him, trusted him with her heart, and now that trust was shattered. The tears threatened to fall, but she held them back, afraid that if she started, she wouldn't be able to stop. Instead, she clenched her fists tightly under the table, willing herself to stay strong. It was too early to fall apart completely. She wasn't sure how long she sat there, but it felt like a lifetime. The weight of the decision ahead hung over her, but she knew one thing for sure: this was not the end. She would fight. She had to. But how? What was left to fight for? Her phone buzzed, and for a moment she considered ignoring it. But then she saw the name, his name. She froze, her heart racing. She didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear his voice again, the man who had torn apart everything they had built. Yet, a part of her still hoped, still clung to the faint idea that maybe, just maybe, he could make it right. She answered the phone with trembling hands, her voice barely a whisper when she spoke. "What do you want?" The silence on the other end was deafening for a moment, and then he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said, but those words felt hollow now. "I know I've hurt you, but I want to make it up to you. Please, let me explain." She wanted to hang up, to block him out for good. But instead she stayed silent, listening, her heart breaking all over again. She hung up the phone, feeling more conflicted than ever. Part of her wanted to believe him, to forgive him, but the other part screamed at her to run, to never look back. The pain of betrayal was still too raw, the trust too broken. She couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. She couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo. As she sat in the silence of her apartment, she realized that something had shifted within her. She couldn't just be the woman who forgave. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she had to stand up for herself now, no matter how hard it was. This was the beginning of something new, something painful yet necessary. She wasn't sure what her next move would be, but for the first time she felt the spark of something like hope. She had to let go, to start healing, and find a way forward on her own. Days passed since she left, but the storm of emotions inside her never settled. She found herself caught between anger and sadness, caught in an endless loop of replaying the moments before the truth was revealed. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the lies, the secret life he had led behind her back. She had loved him, trusted him with her heart, and in return, he had shattered it. Yet, as time moved on, a part of her longed to know if there was something, anything, left worth salvaging. Could she forgive him? Could she ever look at him without remembering the betrayal? Her mind constantly battled between hope and despair, each day feeling like a new level of emotional warfare. Every corner of her home reminded her of him. Every street they once walked together now felt foreign, tainted. Could she rebuild? Could she ever find peace again? The questions, once distant, now consumed her every waking moment, leaving her exhausted and empty. She found herself revisiting their shared memories, the places they had gone, the moments they had laughed, the promises they had made. Each memory felt like a distant dream, almost unreachable. Was it real? Was she simply romanticizing the past, trying to hold on to something that was never truly there? Her mind flicked to the first time they met, the spark in his eyes, the way he made her feel safe. That warmth had slowly morphed into a cage. She had believed in them. But now, as she sat in the empty room, surrounded by pieces of their shared life, the love she once felt seemed almost like a lie. The pain in her chest flared up again, and for a moment, she allowed herself to grieve. But there was something else too, anger. Anger that she had been deceived, that her love had been so easily manipulated. The man she thought she knew was no longer a comfort. He was the source of her pain. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the silence around her. The bed, once a place of comfort, now felt cold and empty. She missed him. Even after everything, even with the pain he caused her, a part of her still missed the life they had. It was as if she was in mourning for a version of him that no longer existed. She wanted to pick up the phone, call him, hear his voice, but the thought of it made her stomach turn. What would she say? What could he say? She had been patient for so long, but now, she realized that she had to be patient with herself. Healing wasn't going to happen overnight. It wasn't about forgiving him. It was about finding the strength to forgive herself. She had ignored so many signs, trusted him blindly. This was her lesson, the lesson she hadn't wanted to learn. But she had learned it now, and she couldn't unlearn it. One evening, she went out for a walk, the cool night air biting at her skin. She needed to clear her mind, to feel like herself again. The streetlights cast long, haunting shadows on the sidewalk, and the city felt both alive and dead at the same time. She passed familiar places, cafes where they had spent time together, parks where they had talked for hours. The memories clung to her like a second skin, refusing to let go. It was during that walk that it finally hit her, the realization that this wasn't just about the affair. This was about her life, her identity, and her future. She could no longer let the past dictate who she was. She had to let go. It wasn't just about his betrayal. It was about her reclaiming her life. And she couldn't do that if she continued to look back. The walk became her moment of clarity, the first step toward healing. She didn't know how long it would take, but she knew that she would have to walk this path alone, for a while at least. A few days later, she met with a close friend at a cafe. Her friend was concerned, but she didn't want to talk about the affair, not yet. Instead, she focused on how she was feeling, her emotional state, the chaos swirling within her. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she confessed. "I feel like I've lost myself in all of this." Her friend listened intently, offering comfort and words of wisdom. "You've always been strong," her friend said. "But this is about you. It's about finding yourself again." The words struck a chord deep within her. She didn't need to fix everything right away. She didn't need to have all the answers. What she needed was time to rediscover who she was outside of the relationship. She had spent so long being part of them that she had forgotten what it meant to just be her. But she would remember, she would find herself again. It was just going to take time. The days after her walk were quieter, but the storm inside her hadn't subsided. Her mind swirled with the memories of the affair, the lies he told, the ways he manipulated her trust. She couldn't help but wonder, how could she have missed the signs? There had been moments of doubt, fleeting thoughts, but she'd pushed them away, convinced that the love they shared was stronger than anything. Now she was left picking up the pieces of her broken heart, trying to make sense of it all. But there was something else she hadn't fully acknowledged. She still loved him. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, part of her still wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation. She wanted him to prove that he could change, that he was capable of being the man she once trusted. But every time she thought about letting him back in, her anger flared up, and her mind reminded her of the hurt he had caused. She was torn between two opposing forces, love and betrayal, hope and reality. She finally agreed to meet him. The conversation was supposed to bring closure, but instead, it left her feeling more uncertain than ever. He sat across from her, looking vulnerable, apologetic, like the man she once loved, and yet so far removed from the man who had broken her. "I'm sorry for everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you. I made a huge mistake, and I want to make things right." His words felt genuine, but they also felt hollow. She had heard apologies before, and they never changed anything. His actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. She looked at him, feeling both compassion and disgust. "How do I trust you again?" she asked, her voice trembling. His eyes met hers, filled with regret. "I'll do whatever it takes," he replied. But even as he said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing he said could erase the damage. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for, but it wasn't this. It wasn't enough. After their meeting, she felt drained. The anger she had been suppressing for weeks resurfaced, stronger than ever. How could he have done this to her? She had given him everything, her trust, her heart, her future. And now, he was asking for a second chance. But was it a chance for redemption, or simply a chance to keep her in his life? She didn't know if she was ready to forgive him or if she ever would be. Every time she thought about moving on, a part of her was tethered to him, still holding on to that flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, he could change. But every thought was followed by a rush of bitterness, a reminder of all the lies. She couldn't deny that a part of her still loved him, but was love enough to heal the wounds he had caused? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that the road ahead was unclear, and the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. She needed time, but time seemed like something she didn't have. The days passed and the tension in her life only grew. Her thoughts became more fragmented. She couldn't focus at work, couldn't relax at home. It was as if the betrayal had stolen her sense of peace. She found herself snapping at small things, lashing out at people who had nothing to do with her pain. Her friend noticed the change and asked if she had talked to him again. "I met with him," she admitted, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "But it only made things worse. I don't know what I want anymore. He wants to fix things. But how can I even trust him enough to let him try?" Her friend sighed, looking at her with concern. "Maybe you need to take a step back," they suggested. "Maybe you need to give yourself some time before making any decisions." But how could she take a step back when her heart was so tangled in the past? She couldn't just forget what had happened, no matter how much she wished she could. Every choice felt impossible, and every decision felt too heavy to make. She found herself at a crossroads. Each day felt like a battle, and the pressure to make a decision weighed heavily on her. Every time she thought about taking him back, the anger would return, hot and sharp. But when she thought about moving on, she felt an overwhelming sense of loss, as if she were leaving behind a part of herself. The truth was, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. She had always defined herself through her relationship with him, but now that it was falling apart, she was forced to face a terrifying unknown. What would her life look like without him? She didn't have the answers, and that scared her. The path of forgiveness seemed too difficult, but the path of leaving him behind seemed equally impossible. In her heart, she knew she couldn't keep living in limbo. She had to make a decision, one that would shape the rest of her life. but she didn't know if she was strong enough to face it. The moment of truth arrived unexpectedly. It wasn't a confession, but a slip, a tiny, almost unnoticeable detail that her ex-partner had let fall from his lips during one of their conversations. At first, she didn't think much of it. But as the days passed, the words gnawed at her, leaving a bitter aftertaste. She thought about it constantly. What did he mean by that one line? She had asked him so many questions already, but somehow, this small detail felt like a puzzle piece that had been hidden from her. Finally, she decided to confront him again. This time she wouldn't settle for excuses. "What did you mean when you said that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. He looked at her, his face paling, as if realizing that he had just stepped into deep water. His eyes darted away before he met her gaze again. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. She could tell there was more than he had ever shared before. The truth she had been searching for came slowly, like pulling teeth. At first he tried to deny it, claiming it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But she pressed harder, her heart pounding in her chest. "Stop lying to me," she demanded. His facade cracked. He exhaled sharply, a defeated look crossing his face. He then confessed something she hadn't expected. There had been more than just one affair. It wasn't just a betrayal of love, but a betrayal of trust on multiple levels. He had been leading a double life, one that she had never known about. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice faltering. But the damage was already done. She felt like her world was collapsing around her. What was worse than betrayal? The knowledge that every moment they had spent together had been tainted by lies. The man she had once loved was not who he seemed to be. And in that moment, she knew she could never go back to who she was before. The world had shifted, and there was no returning to the life she had known. Her mind was in chaos. The shock of his confession left her paralyzed. The betrayal wasn't just about one mistake, one affair. It was about the lies that had surrounded her life for so long. How could she have been so blind? How could she have not seen the warning signs? She thought about the moments that had once been so full of love, now tarnished by the knowledge that they were all built on a foundation of lies. She needed answers, but more than that, she needed to reclaim her power. "You took everything from me," she whispered, her voice trembling with hurt and rage. "I don't even know who you are anymore." His eyes filled with guilt and regret, but they were also tinged with fear, as if he knew that what was left of their connection was slipping away forever. And he was right. She could feel the pieces of her life falling apart, the pieces of their relationship disintegrating in front of her. She wanted to scream, to rage, to hurt him the way he had hurt her. But deep inside she knew the worst punishment would be walking away, leaving him with nothing. The days after the revelation were a blur. She didn't know what to feel anymore. The anger was still there, raw and sharp, but it was joined by an overwhelming sense of disbelief. How could she have loved him so completely and not known what was happening behind her back? The trust she had built her life on had been destroyed, and in its place was a void, one that she didn't know how to fill. She had spent so many years defining herself through their relationship, and now she didn't know who she was without him. The anger was still there, but it was beginning to morph into something else: grief. She grieved the person she thought he was. She grieved the relationship they had. She grieved for the life they had planned together, now shattered into 1,000 pieces. And yet, even through the pain, there was something else stirring inside her: strength. The strength to move on, to heal, to rebuild. But the thought of taking that first step felt impossible. How could she even begin? The next confrontation was inevitable. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, trapped between the past and the uncertain future. She met him again, this time with a new resolve. "I can't keep doing this," she told him, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "You've lied to me for too long. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." His face was filled with desperation, but she couldn't allow herself to be swayed by his guilt anymore. "You had your chance," she continued. "And you blew it. I can't keep living in your shadow. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." She didn't expect him to understand. She didn't need him to. This wasn't about him. This was about her. She had to choose herself, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how long it took to heal. The finality of the moment settled in her chest like a weight. But for the first time in weeks, she felt the smallest spark of hope, hope for herself, for the future, for the possibility of something better beyond the wreckage of her past. The weight of the past few weeks finally became too much to bear. She woke up in the middle of the night, her heart racing with the realization that she couldn't keep running away from the truth. She couldn't keep pretending she had all the answers, or that she could forget what had happened. She couldn't avoid the pain, but she also couldn't keep living in it. There had been too much hurt, too much confusion, too many unanswered questions. She needed closure. She needed peace. She needed to reclaim her life. After everything, the one thing she was sure of now was that she could no longer stay in the relationship. But letting go wasn't easy. It was a brutal, soul-shattering decision. Yet, standing at the edge of it all, she felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She would have to leave him behind, and she would have to do it now, before the pain continued to consume her. She couldn't heal while she was still drowning in the past. She picked up the phone with trembling hands. The decision had been made, and it was time to face him one last time. When he answered, his voice was uncertain, as though sensing the finality in the air. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. This isn't working anymore. I can't keep doing this to myself." The line went silent for a moment, and she could almost feel him searching for the right words. But she knew there were no words left to save them. "I've tried to make it work," he said quietly. "I swear I've tried." But his words didn't hold weight anymore. She had already tried for too long, and it was time to stop. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm done. I need to move on. I need to find myself again." Her heart ached as she said the words, but they were true. She couldn't keep holding on to a version of him that didn't exist. The phone call ended, and she felt an odd sense of relief and grief intertwining. After the phone call, she sat alone in the silence of her apartment, letting the gravity of her decision sink in. The feeling of emptiness was overwhelming. But it wasn't just emptiness, it was a feeling of release. She had done the hardest thing she could ever do, and now she would have to rebuild. The life she had known was gone. The future she had imagined with him was now just a memory. But as she sat there, she realized something else. She wasn't completely broken. She was still there, still breathing, still able to move forward. It would take time. She would have to face the waves of emotion, the loneliness, the confusion. But for the first time in months, she could finally see a flicker of light ahead. It was small, but it was enough to guide her. She wasn't a victim of her past anymore. She was the creator of her own future. The road ahead was unknown, but it was hers to take. The days that followed felt like a blur of emotional turbulence. She moved through the motions of daily life, but everything felt different. The world was quieter, and yet it was full of possibilities. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It was the feeling that she had failed. Failed in love, failed in trusting someone she thought she knew. But with each passing day, she started to realize that this wasn't a failure. This was a lesson. It was a painful, heartbreaking lesson, but it was one that she needed to learn. She had put herself last for so long, bending to the will of someone who never truly valued her. But now she could see her worth. She could see her strength. And she was ready to reclaim her life. She would move forward, step by step, no longer held back by the weight of the past. She would build herself back from the ground up, and this time, it would be on her own terms. Months had passed since the breakup, and the woman had found herself again. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first met him, and that was a good thing. The scars of the past would always be there, but they didn't define her anymore. She had learned to live with them, to see them as part of her journey, not as signs of weakness. She had surrounded herself with friends who supported her, with people who valued her for who she was, not for what she could give. She had started to explore passions she had neglected for too long, things that made her feel alive. She was growing, evolving, and finding peace in the silence that once felt so lonely. The road ahead wasn't always smooth, but she knew now that she was strong enough to face whatever came her way. She wasn't afraid of the future anymore. She was ready for it. It had been months since the breakup, and she could finally breathe again. The weight that had pressed down on her chest for so long had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of peace. Her days were no longer filled with anxiety or uncertainty, and slowly she had begun to rediscover joy in the little things. She had started to embrace her independence, enjoying quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, long walks in the park, and time spent reading books she had always meant to finish. There were still moments of sadness, of course, times when the ache of the past crept in. But now, those moments were fleeting. She had learned how to navigate them, how to move forward without being dragged back into the past. She wasn't perfect, but she was healing. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly living again, not just surviving. One afternoon, she met an old friend for coffee. It had been a while since they had caught up, and as they sat across from each other, her friend noticed the change. "You look different," her friend said, a knowing smile on their face. "You look free." The words struck a chord deep within her. She realized in that moment that her friend was right. She had found her freedom again, not the kind of freedom that came from leaving someone behind, but the kind of freedom that came from reclaiming herself. She had rediscovered her voice, her passion, and her worth. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still parts of her that were healing, but she was no longer held captive by her past. "It's been a long road," she admitted, her voice full of quiet pride. "But I'm getting there." The conversation drifted to lighter topics, but inside, she felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years. She had taken up a new hobby, painting. It wasn't something she had ever done before, but it gave her a sense of creative release she had been missing. Each brushstroke felt like a small act of healing, a way to express everything she had been holding inside for so long. Her canvas was messy, chaotic in places, yet it felt more like herself than any of her carefully organized days had. She didn't care if the painting was perfect. What mattered was that she was letting herself feel, letting herself be vulnerable. She would sit for hours, lost in the colors and shapes, finding peace in the process. Each painting told a story of growth, pain, healing, and freedom. She realized as she stepped back and surveyed her work that she had created something beautiful. It wasn't just the painting, it was the person she was becoming. She had begun to trust herself again, to trust her instincts, her decisions, and her ability to navigate the world on her own. There were still moments of doubt, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to embrace uncertainty, to accept that life was a journey with no clear answers. And that was okay. She had grown into a person who could handle the complexities of life, who could face challenges head-on without being afraid of failure. As she sat on her balcony one evening watching the sunset, she realized that her life was exactly where it needed to be. She wasn't the person she had been before the heartbreak, but that person had led her to this moment. And this moment was beautiful. She had found her peace, her power, and her purpose. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was living her truth. The months had turned into years, and with each passing day, the woman grew stronger, wiser, more herself. She had built a life she was proud of, a life that was no longer defined by someone else's mistakes or betrayals. She had found love again, but this time, it was the love she had for herself. She had realized that she didn't need anyone to complete her. She was already whole. The love she now shared with someone else wasn't about filling a void. It was about sharing her life, her journey, and her growth. As she walked down the street one sunny afternoon, her heart felt light. She was free. She had finally forgiven herself for the past, and she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. There was still so much to learn, so much to experience, but she knew now that she was capable of facing it all, with strength, grace, and an open heart. It had been a long journey, one filled with pain, self-discovery, and resilience. As she stood at the edge of the city park, watching the sunset over the horizon, she realized how far she had come. The woman who once trembled at the thought of being alone was now standing tall, no longer defined by her past mistakes or someone else's betrayal. The light of the setting sun reflected the warmth and peace she had found within herself. Every step of the way had been a lesson, teaching her the power of self-love, the strength in letting go, and the beauty of embracing change. She had lost something once, something that felt irreplaceable, but she had gained so much more in return. The future was no longer a source of fear, but a canvas of endless possibilities. There would always be challenges, but now, she faced them with confidence, knowing that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. And for the first time she felt whole, truly whole, on her own. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she turned and walked down the path, her steps sure and steady. She didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, she felt excited about it. There were so many things she wanted to experience. Places to visit, people to meet, dreams to chase. She had learned that life wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about embracing the lessons that came with it. She had learned to trust herself again, to listen to her heart, and to follow the path that felt right for her. With each passing day, she was becoming more and more of the person she had always wanted to be. Strong, independent, and unapologetically herself. The future was hers to shape, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to rush. She would take it one step at a time, enjoying the journey as it unfolded before her. The journey of healing had been long, but it had taught her something invaluable. She was her own source of strength. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She was enough, just as she was. The pain from the past no longer haunted her, and though she would never forget the lessons it had taught her, she had let go of the bitterness. Now, when she thought about him, there was no longer rage or sorrow. Instead, there was just acceptance. She understood that everything had happened for a reason. Without the heartbreak, she would never have discovered her true potential. And now, as she stood at the edge of a new chapter, she felt a sense of gratitude for everything she had gone through. The world was waiting for her, and she was ready to step into it fully. With each new day, she had the opportunity to create a life she loved, a life that was hers to shape. She sat on a bench, surrounded by the stillness of the evening. It was the first time in a long while that she felt completely at ease, her mind free from the constant chatter of worry and doubt. As the stars began to appear in the sky, she realized how much she had changed. There was a time when she had believed that her worth was tied to someone else's love or approval, but now, she knew better. She had learned to love herself, to accept herself, and to embrace her own strength. And in that moment, sitting under the vast expanse of the night sky, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the person she had become. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and that was enough. For the first time, she was at peace with who she was, and who she was becoming. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew that with every step, she would be walking toward the life she was meant to live. The night was peaceful, the kind of peaceful that only comes when you finally accepted the past and embraced the present. She stood up from the bench, feeling the cool night air on her skin, and began walking toward the street. She was no longer afraid of being alone, because now she understood the power of solitude. She had learned to be her own companion, her own source of strength. The future no longer seemed daunting. It felt like an open road, waiting for her to take the first step. As she walked down the path, the city lights flickered around her, casting a warm, inviting glow. She knew that life would have its ups and downs, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, because she had found herself. She was whole again. And with that, she stepped forward into the future, no longer looking back.